Thank you to everybody for attending our Best Practices for Agencies and Enterprise Digital Asset Management Roundtable. This is Jill Talvinsari with IO Integration, and I'm here today with Mike Watson, also from IO Integration UK, with Rich Carroll, who's with us from the Chicago area. He's one of our expert DAM deployment gurus. And we also have Mohan Taylor. He's with the Office of the CTO with North Plains, one of our partners who specializes in Telescope and Zynet. And we also have Matt Furlong, our Director of Professional Services. Mike, would you like to introduce everybody?
Sure, thanks, Jill. Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Watson, the Sales Director for IOI UK, based out of London. Thank you for joining us today for this roundtable, Best Practice for Agencies in the Enterprise. I think it should last around 40 minutes with some time for questions, but I'd encourage you to put any questions forward at any time during the presentation. It's not really a presentation, it is really a roundtable discussion. So we'd like it to be as interactive as possible. Just briefly before I introduce everyone, just give you the rationale behind these discussions. Really just to, I guess, stimulate thought, engage with people who are looking at asset management or who have asset management systems in place, to share some battle stories with each other and the experiences that we've had with them, and hopefully impart some of our own experience onto you guys as well. Kicking off then, first off, there's me. I'm, as I said, Mike Watson from IO Integration UK. I've been working, well, IO UK has been going since, I think, March last year. And I've been involved with asset management systems and consulting with agencies, publishers, and enterprises since 2001. We also have on the call, as Jill said, Mohan Taylor, who's the CTO at North Plains. North Plains recently acquired Zynet, which is a key partner for IOI. I'm sure you've heard of that asset management system. Mohan, would you like to give it a little bit of background? You do a much better job than I can.
Sure. Hi, my name is Mohan Taylor. I'm based out of London in the UK. I've been with North Plains just over a year, working primarily on some of our bigger customers and the acquisition of Zynet, and most recently a UK-based marketing resource company called Via. Prior to North Plains, I've been involved in the digital asset management world for about 12 or 13 years, primarily in the services business. So I've implemented a number of digital asset management systems for many different verticals, ranging from automotive through to drinks companies and audio companies. So that's a little bit of my background.
Thanks, Mohan. We also have Rich Carroll, who's technical sales at IO Integration. Rich is a veteran, I would say, so I hope you don't mind me saying that, Rich, but he's got 20 years of experience in the creative industry. Rich, if you'd like to give yourself a bit of background, please.
Yeah, veteran is kind of a unfortunate moniker to wear, but I think the gray hair on the side of my head would attest to that. Like so many other folks within IO, I come from the industries that we support. I spent many years within advertising and pre-press, but always been trying to find automated or more efficient ways to get the work out the done, because it never seems like there's enough time to try and stay on top of everything.
Thank you, Rich. And last but not least, Matt Furlong. Matt is our Director of Professional Services at IO Integration, which is an absolutely vital arm of our business. Matt also has a great wealth of experience in information technology, specifically within the agency workflow space. Matt, if you'd like to give yourself a bit of background.
Sure, thanks. So my background is primarily IT. IT for the last started in about 5 years at agencies, and then eventually evolved more into the interactive world. Whereas my team is probably more suited in the print world, my focus tends to be involving both the interactive and the print world, which is where DAM technologies seem to be going into nowadays. Been doing this for, well, not a veteran, that's for sure. Do have gray hair, but still can't qualify as a veteran yet. but probably 12 years, and now with IOI for the last 3 years.
Thanks, Matt. So that's pretty much the introductions done from our side. The way this is going to work is Jill's going to put some questions to the panel, and everybody's going to put in their views and comments. As I said in the beginning, it'd be great if you would like to participate. You can either put your hand up by clicking the put a hand up button, and we can start the conversation and get the dialogue going. So, with that, Jill, if you'd like to kick off.
Great. So basically, anyone that wants to participate, please just go ahead and either ask a question or raise your hand, and I will unmute you, and you can join the conversation. The first thing I wanted to talk about is just what's the right type of company? How do you know when your enterprise is ready for a digital asset management solution? And how do you know you would want digital asset management versus MAM, DAM, CMS, all of those options that are out there?
I think, Rich, I think that might be a good one for you to kick off with, since you've come from that side of the business.
Yeah, it's almost like, I often equate so many things to being a parent, but when, they ask, like, when do you start letting your kids feed themselves? Well, it's when they start feeding themselves, and it's kind of the same way with a DAM system. The right time is when people are starting to talk about it a lot and really starting to seek out a solution, whether it be DAM or CRM or whatever. It tends to become self-evident. I think it can be challenging if your user base is not really asking or thinking about it, and you try to put a DAM solution on top of that. That can often cause some pushback. So usually, we get contacted once people start asking lots of questions like, "Hey, I can't find anything. Maybe we should start looking at DAM solutions."
So with that in mind, how do you, because there are some pitfalls that can come up, especially if the user base is less technology savvy and is still using a lot of traditional manual workflow methodologies, what would you suggest for, what are the top 3 secrets to success of how to implement a successful DAM solution?
Again, to continue with the parent analogy, but involvement. You can't just tell your kids to do their chores. You got to kind of get them excited about it, explain to them why they need to do these things. We spend a lot of time talking before we actually put boots on the ground and start to deploy a solution, because you need to get all of the concerns and business objectives and political ramifications out on the table early on. So it's really, change management is a huge part of that. That'd be probably my number one thing to get done first.
Okay. What about you, Matt?
I would totally agree with that.
Yeah, I think change management, the human side of the change is definitely an enormous pitfall that we're seeing, and to Rich's point, the idea of going in and implementing a system and walking out and expecting it to be perfect is just doesn't work. There's an entire process that needs to happen, and it's not just about coming in and saying, here's, we need a DAM, how much is it, and you install and you leave. There's a great deal of change associated with that, and really understanding that level of change is going to dictate success, quite honestly. So getting into your question about the other areas of success, I think one commonality that we're seeing for successful implementations is the involvement of IT. And oftentimes, they can be seen as a challenge. And typically in a DAM case, it's not something that they're really familiar with, and they don't have the skill set to even support. So bringing them in to really into the conversation as early as possible and allowing them to have a say is going to, in the end, help you with the implementation.
I've also heard that it's important to start small, like with a pilot and a key group that is embracing that kind of change, and then show success there. Would you normally have IT involved in that, in a small case pilot like that too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think, no, that's fine. I was just going to say, I think the more work you do up front, the less pain it will be down the road. And by that I mean you need to, as a business, really look at your requirements. And same with any big purchase. You know, you really need to establish what you want to achieve with the product or with the solution. Look at your individual business needs and requirements. Really examine them. And in fact, companies and system integrators or vendors can help you uncover what those needs are. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? So the more work you do up front about really tying down exactly what you want to get out of the system will save you a lot of pain and headache, and also be much easier to sell internally if you're clear about what you want to achieve, how it's going to manage my business risk, and how it's going to ultimately save the company money. Once you have a coherent set of requirements, then that would definitely save you, I think, a lot of time and effort later down the road. It's one of my key things anyway.
Well, and along those lines, just to add to that, one concern is as you realize that the DAM solution has all of these features, you're probably going to want them. And I think getting to the point of keeping it small, you really do have to have a strong lead who can keep the requirements as small as possible and stick to that, regardless of the benefits that are going to happen along the way. Success is dictated by meeting the core requirements first and then building, through phases. So it's very easy to immediately add things on as you're going along, but you also have to balance that with what is this, why did we bring this in, and what's the core requirement that we need to meet? What's the core pain point that we're trying to address?
Yeah, and in actual fact, what I see happening when I meet with these people researching this kind of technology is that other departments might get involved. You run the risk of showing people too much about the capabilities of the product, because then other people say, oh, can it do this and can it do that? And it really sort of dilutes really what the core requirements were in the first place, and then it kind of dilutes the whole impact of the system in its own way, which is quite interesting. But what we tend to do is really look at your workflows, we map them out with you. We look at, really, I hate using this phrase, but is the low-hanging fruit first? Where can we get the quick wins? And I think that's always a pretty good place to start, really.
Traditionally, there's usually a bit of friction between the IT department and the creatives or the marketing group. And I was curious, how does a systems integrator help bridge that gap, or is it something that needs to be solved internally by the business sponsor behind the system? How does that usually work out?
Well, it depends really on the organization and the organization structure. But with that said, an integrator typically has several different areas to focus on, and one is the workflow side. So that's really the team that knows what the agency or the company is trying to do with the DAM solution. And then there's also our support/IT side. And having those two groups involved in the project will help bridge the gap that any company might have between their marketing department, let's say, and their IT group. But ignoring either group to get something implemented is definitely going to end in failure, especially as ultimately the goal is to get a system that is supported, that is integrated into the agency's workflow, both in terms of a day-to-day, but also in terms of support. So an integrator, if done right, can help bridge the gap between those two departments.
That makes sense.
We also see a variety of cooperation levels between IT and creatives, and it ranges from downright hostility to some tolerance. But ultimately, you just need to get in and figure out for the IT department, especially, how can they be motivated? Where are the value adds for them? Because typically, IT is managed as a cost center. So there's very little incentive for folks on the technology side to undertake new processes because it costs them time and labor and money that they don't have. There's tremendous pressure for them to, do things leaner with less capital and expense. So showing IT how this will ultimately save them money, reduce their support load, or speed up their response times is usually the best way to get them incentivized.
Now, what about that backdoor approach that some marketing departments are starting to embrace, which is, there's all these different SaaS or cloud-based solutions available. So they look at that and they go, oh, we can just implement this on our own. We won't need IT. It's just our budget. How does that work out? And what are the differences between an on-site implementation and SaaS? What are the pros and cons?
Yeah, that's always very tempting.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Rich, carry on.
That's always tempting for a marketing department to kind of do an end around on IT.
Mm-hmm.
And the SaaS model in particular is very attractive because it's usually a very low entry point. However, we've seen a number of cases where the overall scope is not really considered correctly, and you have to be very careful from a legal perspective to make sure that you're not stepping outside of what your corporation is responsible for. So while yes, it is attractive, it isn't necessarily the right fit for everybody, and really the proper path is usually just to have an honest conversation with your IT department, say, here's what we're doing. You can either be on board or we're going to have to find another way to do it, but this is an area that we need to solve for.
I think, Mohan, you might be in a good position to put a view on this, because obviously North Plains has recently acquired Zynet, has recently acquired Via as well, which is an MRM type tool for brand management. So they've really got every base covered in terms of work in progress, asset management, enterprise database, asset management repository, and on the delivery side as well. And I guess, Mohan, when you're meeting with customers, it's you've got a solution pretty much for that could touch many different departments or many different types of requirements. It must be quite a interesting challenge for you guys now to really work out how to fit the right product in with the right requirements or with your specific.
Yeah, I mean it is and it isn't. You could look at our strategy and say we're covering all bases, and therefore whichever direction the customer wants to go in, we've got a means to support that. But I think different parts of the creative life cycle actually have different requirements, and different companies have different suitability for whether they go with a cloud-based offering or whether they want to host locally. For example, something like Zynet, which is much more of a file system-oriented DAM, it makes a lot more sense for that to be hosted behind the firewall. Even though internet bandwidth is a lot higher now than it used to be, in the creative process, you're dealing with a number of iterations over a short period of time, and to kind of sync that data with the cloud becomes quite an expensive business to be in. But equally, we have customers who want to expose a brand presence to their consumers when they're dealing with a primarily consumption-based DAM. And putting that in the cloud can make a lot of sense, because especially when the consumers of that content are actually external to your business, it kind of puts it out of your network, means you can control the bandwidth without impacting your business. So there's a lot of pros with that approach. You get some customers who are kind of in the middle, where they have everything. We've got one customer right now where 50% of their business is dealing with assets that are generated and consumed externally to their sites. The rest of the 50% of the business are actually geographically separated, and they've gone for actually hosting it internally, primarily because they worked out that even if they were to host it externally, they still are going to have bandwidth implications. The internal users still need to get access to those assets, and putting it in their own data centers gave them better control over that access. And that's something which you still can't do particularly well with a cloud offering. You can't dictate where your cloud provider puts its hardware, whereas if you're doing it internally, then you have that option.
Interesting.
So another
just to add on to that, one other thing that we're seeing is, and we have seen for the last few years, is the decision to sort of go around IT is sort of coming around, and essentially IT is becoming aware and has to then own a system that they don't feel comfortable with. So a lot of projects are being created where a solution that seemed easy and seemed simple and seemed correct ends up being an enormous amount of work trying to get all of this data pulled off of the cloud and into an internal system. So, you know, the ROI there in terms of making an easy decision at the front end versus having to make a complex project in the back end is you know, questionable.
And you get that initial stage of implementing a dam where you're just trying to get some stuff under control. You hit that one really quickly with a cloud offering, but then when you want to start enriching those assets with, say, product data or some other kind of business information, that becomes a lot harder when you've got a cloud provider. It's not impossible, but most organizations aren't set up for doing that right now. So then that becomes quite a challenging IT integration project. Where it might be, if that was known up front, then it could be architected so that you can support that from the first point rather than a few years down the line when you've got a few terabytes of assets out on some cloud site.
Mohan, do you think it's inevitable that eventually with the increasing bandwidth, telecommunications technology, server architecture, etc., do you think it's inevitable that eventually digital asset management will be cloud-based or hybrid at least, or do you think that because of security, performance, and other factors, that there's always going to be at least for the larger companies anyway who employ these systems for critical operations, it's still largely going to be in-house and on-site?
Yeah, I think we're going to see more moving towards the cloud just because it becomes an easy path to go down. And I think certainly as larger businesses become more adapted to cloud offerings, then the kind of the IT blocker of, well, we can't support you if you do that mentality, that will slowly disappear. But I think there's always going to be a need for something behind the firewall for a couple of different reasons. As you mentioned, the security aspect of it. Some people, this is their stuff, and it could be highly confidential. It could be, a distinguishing factor for their business that they don't want it to be out there. A whole variety of reasons. So, just because of that, they want it behind the firewall. And that's not to say that I think that cloud security is inherently weak. I think it can be made strong. But it's just that mentality of having it in your vault inside your own business. The other thing is, I think that,
isn't it?
Sorry?
It's a mindset.
Exactly. And we've got customers like that, even down to the point of where they won't put the DAM architecture within their DMZ. It has to be behind even the second firewall within their own internal network. The other thing is, I think, as bandwidth grows, our ability to consume that bandwidth also grows. So, sending high-res JPEGs around used to be quite a heavyweight thing to be doing. Now it's not really a problem at all, but we're seeing more and more adoption of high-resolution video. So as the bandwidth increases, equally our formats and content that we're consuming become richer, and therefore we make good use of that bandwidth. And the same problems then exist where in the creation process we're dealing with high volumes of content that are large, heavyweight pieces of content within a business, and so the same approaches need to apply.
Okay. Before we move on, I just want to go to the attendees and the participants. Is there any questions on what's being discussed up to this point at the moment before we move on to the next question for our panel?
I don't see any hands raised, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next question.
Okay.
So one that came up last time we had this conversation was, obviously the investment that we make in marketing automation solutions or digital media technologies is very beneficial to the business, but they can also be a significant upfront investment. And so once you've got IT at least somewhat on board, how do you take the position to senior management to create a business case or calculate the return on investment that you'll get from your new system? Because I've heard it can be anywhere from 3 to 18 months payback, and then usually people talk about looking at different variables like the number of assets that you're utilizing, how much time you spend searching for them, your archival process, how many resources are involved with your timed production. But how do you actually put together that business case and get senior management on board?
Well, senior management doesn't care about your pain, right? I mean, not to be blunt about it, but it's a business. So making arguments for why things are difficult or why things are frustrating is really not the way to get buy-in. It's a business, so the way to get buy-in is to show the numbers, show how whatever the solution is will positively impact the business, either by saving money or by opening new revenue streams. And depending on the business type, there's lots of different ways to attack that, but you need to understand how your CFO is really motivated. If we're talking about straight like ROI for cost savings, there's a whole number of online calculators. I know there's one on Vire.com, but basically the simple formula is figure out what your man cost is or woman cost is for a year, 2,000 hours, and you want to figure out what their actual hourly rate is. We use $150 an hour here in the States as a fairly common number, assuming somebody is, that's the total cost of that employee to the company. So 2,000 hours times $150 an hour gets you $300,000 per year if you can save one man person. So you want to look at, and basically you do that by adding up all of the little minutia that you're saving that person over the course of his or her day. So the 15 minutes spent searching for a file, the half an hour spent prepping and delivering a file. You know, if one person is losing 2 hours a week due to inefficiencies and you have 20 people who are doing that, there's your theoretical person year or your $300,000, and then kind of extrapolate that out and present that as a numbers case back to your senior management.
And something else I wanted to add, you can jump in with your experience here, but I've seen that, you know, ROI is calculated by basically headcount reduction. But what I've heard from most of our clients is they end up being able to simply take on more work with their same talented creatives. So they're not really getting,
Yeah, they're really not doing a headcount reduction because there's no more reduction to be had. Everybody's running way over capacity right now. So it's more about one of my customers in particular saved himself a body and a half. Almost two people were spending their time doing inefficient things that were solved by putting in a digital asset management system, and he was able to take those two people and put them on billable work. So not only was he saving the company money, he was bringing in new revenue streams.
Do any of the others of you have experience with customers bringing in new revenue streams? I've heard that in several cases, especially in the agencies.
I think agencies that they have possibly brought in some new revenue streams. Most of the agencies that I've dealt with, really, they use it as a tool to win business, and they either, you know, give it away as part of and take the money from their creative output, or they, you know, in some pre-press houses they do it they do it in the reverse, you know. So it kind of swings and roundabouts, but I think the trend really is, particularly in the agency market, is to really package it as part of an overall part of their service. So it's I don't know if anyone else in the States has a different experience, but I think, you know, the more they get then the more they get IT involved and more they lean on IT services and become more of an IT company, then, you know, that they can provide new services through the asset management system, which they may be able to, you know, offer, you know, things at a cost. But generally speaking, I think they use asset management to kind of streamline their workflows and their interactions with their clients.
And I think this is where it's sort of, you know, the ROI discussion is complicated because really this is where the digital asset management becomes more about, this is where it flirts with the interactive world. It's more about the user experience and the tools that an asset management can then provide as a sleeker, better experience for a company's client base. And so what we're finding is more and more clients are actually bringing these in as experiences, not necessarily about, it's not even necessarily about the digital asset management componentry, but about the experience that their clients are now having. And to get clients or to get projects, what they're really trying to do is build out a full solution set that does include the DAM, but also includes an online component, online review, all of the above to really bolster up, their client's experience.
Building on that, it's been reported that in the last year that video formats grew by 55% in terms of which assets companies are focused on. Can any of you talk a little bit more about how, brand style guides and online review and approval, how does all that play into the prevalence we're seeing of video campaigns, social media campaigns, and all the new media?
So, Mohan, do you have a view on that one?
I think this is a really interesting area, and I think as a software vendor, we are putting significant effort into bolstering our video support, because I think the video world in sort of the non-traditional sense is definitely maturing. We had a customer a little while ago where they decided to take their website experience and change it from primarily image-based to video-based. And it sounds like a great idea, but behind the scenes were a whole load of creatives who are used to dealing with flat images, suddenly having to embrace high-res video, having to embrace tools like Avid and products which were very foreign. But everything from their IT infrastructure right through to the tools they were using, which was very unprepared for dealing with that content type. So I think as a software vendor, we're obviously going to try and make that easier for people. But yeah, processes are going to have to adapt. Dealing with video is different to dealing with images. Not just from a volume perspective, but also the tools that you deal with. Things like doing annotations for review and approval become more complex, and it's almost like a meeting of two worlds: the video world and sort of the image world. All have their own language, so it's quite interesting.
In fact, just to build on that, Mohan, just speaking as a consumer, if I'm buying a product, whether it be a kitchen appliance or a car or whatever it might be, if there isn't some sort of video demonstration or some sort of animated demonstration, if you look at most websites these days, they have at least an animated demonstration of their product, which very simply tells you what it does in layman's terms, or it could be a full demonstration of a product, or somebody just wearing a pair of shoes or whatever it is. It's definitely increasing, usually, especially in the online world. And I think if you're reviewing asset management systems, be time well spent looking quite carefully at their video support.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing video not just on websites, but also point of sale material where it's now, maybe a tablet that's mounted or one of these touch screens, where you're getting clips of video demonstrating products rather than flat images. So we're going to see it all over the place. And I think the consumer's expectation now, as you say, is that they should be able to see a video of a product, rather than static images.
And that really is going to be the final nail in the coffin, I think, for the high street a little bit. Once that really becomes richer in content, it's going to be very difficult for high street retailers, I think, to compete with the online world that we've already seen in the UK. Quite a few high street retailers gone to the wall this year already. And I'm not saying it's all down to online retailers, but certainly they've had a big impact on the high street, and it's them being able to bring really the high street to their living rooms, really, and part of that is video, definitely.
So building on that, one thing that's a hot topic right now is customer experience. So, when we say that, you think of the end customer experience. They're looking for a very rich, deep, video, 3D experience. So looking at it from both sides, though, both the internal user as well as the end customer experiencing the brand. What are some of the benefits that DAM brings to that? And if I already owned a DAM solution, what would be the next investment I would want to make technology-wise so that I can bring a richer experience to both my internal users and my external customers?
Well, I think DAM can help a huge amount, especially with video. Where in DAM you're dealing with thumbnails and preview quality images for imagery. It works a similar way with video, but becomes even more important because the difference between web quality video for even good enough quality to do a review and approval and the broadcast quality is such a dramatic difference in file size that DAM's ability to allow you to interact and work with content without touching the high res becomes very valuable. The conversion time to convert high-res video to other qualities that are needed is a time-consuming business, and letting the asset management solution deal with that heavyweight process becomes really key to allowing your users to carry on with their daily work. We had a project a few years back with a TV broadcaster that was outputting a number of small promos, and they were doing it all by hand. So literally their user's desktop would be tied up as they converted the video. They decided to put our DAM in place, and then it became a background asynchronous task, so just running behind the scenes. So they would just set off the job and off they go on to their next task. So productivity increased, and they changed from supporting I think about 20 different output channels to about 300 with the same staff.
Wow.
So along those lines, I would also, there's a couple of things that I'd like to add on that is, and essentially, when you first do the install, I think we talked about simplifying the requirements and making sure that you're hitting the core needs. And essentially, a DAM is not a once you install it, you let it go and it'll work forever sort of situation. It's an organic change process. And if you simplify the requirements at the beginning, you need to come back and adjust as you need, as your requirements, as your customers' requirements, as your internal requirements grow. And to do that, what we're finding is that you also need to integrate with the idea of not just looking at your workflow on a regular basis and making sure that the systems that you put in place or system supports that, but also looking from a user experience architecture standpoint that ultimately all the features that you need are there and all the features that you don't need aren't there. And that may seem like an overly simple statement to make, but as the requirements, as video, as interactive sort of expands in what it can do and how it can be presented or delivered, you really have to look at how are you sharing the assets internally and how are you delivering that externally. And that's an ongoing conversation. That's not just something you agree to this year and then let it be for 4 years. That's something that you have to have regularly.
Okay, so we're approaching the end of this session, but I think we've got 1 or 2 more questions. Jill, would you like to, what have we got left?
I think we've actually covered it. I'd love to open it up to the floor, though, and see if anyone has any particular questions. I might even put Mary on the spot here.
Actually, this is a great opportunity to ask some questions. It's completely, as I said, open forum. Ask whatever you want.
Why don't we go ahead and Mary, I'm going to take you off mute. Thank you for joining us today.
Sure, glad to be here.
Do you have anything that you haven't heard us talk about that, running the DAM forums and online communities as you do you have anything else that you think people would want to hear some commentary on?
No, you guys really touched upon it, but I cannot stress enough user experience and having a delightful user experience with the tools that they're using, making it as simple as possible for them, which, when you talk about change management as it relates to user experience, and we all kind of know this, obviously, if it's easy for them to use, easy for them to see, easy for them to get, and they'll be more adept to wanting to use the tools and almost getting excited about it as well.
So it sounds like having a strong internal champion that's really behind the system and is enthusiastic about it is key to some of that acceptance.
Precisely.
Do we have any other comments? I think that was the other panelists, the other attendees have said that they're happy with what we've been presenting, but that they don't have questions at this time. So with that, are there any final comments from our panel? Otherwise, we can wrap up the session.
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending. We will be hosting more of these. I think the more we, interact and ask questions and discuss and exchange ideas, then, hopefully we'll be able to make sense of, or make more sense of this, environment that we're in right now. So thank you very much for attending. Thank you everyone. Thank you very much to the participants again. We'll be in touch shortly with the next session.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. We really appreciate your time. And if you have any additional questions, feel free to contact me at IO Integration. It's just jill@iointegration.com or mwatson@iointegration.com. Any of us would be happy to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.